So we're going to talk a little bit about recursive equations or recursive patterns. So these are a set of patterns here, and if you notice and take a look at them for a little while, you have 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. So with this pattern, we're just adding 2 to each term every time. And then the second one, we're going to be adding 5 each time. And if you look at these other three, it's the same thing. We're just adding one number to the previous number each time to get the next number. Okay? And these are what we call recursive patterns. Okay? Now, at the top of your notes, you will have 2 spaces to write, or well, 4 spaces to write these vocabulary words. Here are the first 2. Now, a recursive equation, it's an equation that we use to describe the pattern in a recursive pattern. So if you notice these first patterns up here, I was adding 2 to each term in the sequence. So the recursive equation might go something to the effect of a sub 1 plus 2 equals a sub 2, or now plus 2 equals next. A sequence is a list of numbers where each term is based on the previous terms using a set pattern or rule. So the rule that we had set up here was adding 2 or adding 5 or adding 3, and that's how we were getting the next terms. So go ahead and write those down, pause if you need to. The next vocabulary words we have are domain and range, and we're going to come back to those a lot. Domain is a set of all inputs, every number you're starting with or putting into your formula. Range is a set of all outputs, all the numbers that are going to come out of that formula. So like domain would be the numbers that would go into the now, and range would be the numbers that would come into the next. And I'll explain that more in the next slide. So what we have here is we have a sequence, and we're going to ask a couple questions to try to get us to the point where we can write an equation about that. So first things first, what do we start with? Well, the first number that we start with is 5. So 5 is the starting number in this pattern. And what is the pattern? Well, we're just adding 5 to each term to get the next one. So 5 plus 5 is 10, 10 plus 5 is 15, and so forth. Now next form. Now next form, this is an informal way of writing a formula, but if we would write a now next form, it would go something like this. Now plus 5 equals next. So I take one number in the sequence, let's say it's 5, I add 5 to it, and it becomes the next number, 10. 10, I take that number, which would be the now, add 5 to it, plus 5, 15, it would be the next. 15 is the next number. Okay, so let's try this again here. Now here, this is a little bit different. What you're going to have here, we can go in 2 directions here. We can go from 1 to 3 to find a pattern, 2 to 6, 3 to 12, 4 to 24, 5 to 48, but that's a totally different lesson. So what we're going to do is we're going to go from negative 3 to positive 6, and positive 6 to negative 12, and negative 12 to negative 24, and my mouse slipped, so that's why that happened. Alright, so we're going to clear the ink, and we're going to try this again. Alright, so what is the starting value? What's the starting value? We're going to start on this right side, so negative 3 is our starting value. So what's the pattern? Alright, well, this one's going to take a little more thought, right? If I'm going from negative 3 to 6, 6 to negative 12, some of them are positive, some of them are negative. So let's forget about the negatives for a second. If I go from 3 to 6, 6 to 12, 12 to 24, 24 to 48, that's 3 times 2 is 6, 6 times 2 is 12. That's like multiplying by 2. Now we're going to go back. Remember, they're alternating negatives, right? So what happens if I multiply by negative 2? So negative 3 times negative 2, that'd be positive 6, because a negative times a negative is positive. 6 times negative 2, that would be negative 12. So that works. So we're multiplying by negative 2. Okay, so that's our pattern. Well, what would the now next form be? Well, we start with now, the first number, negative 3. We would multiply, and this is the symbol for multiplication when all else fails on the computer. Multiply times negative 2, and that would equal the next number. Okay. So moving on, this is for you to try, and that is also on your notes. So go ahead and give those a shot. You want to figure out what number you're starting with, and can you figure out a now next form for that? Okay.